Let's look at our chromatography experiment. Chromatography is a method of separation that's based on solubility. Just to remind you how we set this up, we had a piece of paper, our chromatography paper, and our chromatography paper acts as the stationary phase. And then we drew a line and some X's, and we dotted our solutions on the X's that are on this kind of the start line. Our solutions had cations in them, which are positive ions, positive metal ions. And then we rolled up the paper and we put it into a beaker that had a solution. And the solution down here, we may call it a solvent, or it's called the eluting solution. Because once we put it in there, what happens is that solution will move up the paper, which is the process of elution, and it carries to some extent the cations with it, depending on their solubility in the solution versus how much they stick to the paper. Okay, so let's look at what those results looked like. Afterward, we had a pattern of spots, and on this one, my Y and Z are my unknowns. And so if I want to identify what's in each of those, I just look at what it lines up with. So in other words, Y has 2 spots. That means it has 2 substances in it. And then I look to see how it lines up to decide what's in it. It looks like this one has C and D. And then on Z, my unknown Z looks like it has just B. Another thing we might want to do is to calculate an RF, a retention factor. And that's a measure of how far the substance travels versus how far the solution went. So basically, to do a retention factor, we need to make measurements. It's the distance that the spot travels, or in our case, that's the cation, divided by the distance that the solvent travels, our eluting solution. Okay. And so when you are measuring these, we always measure from this line. So that's our 0 because that's where we applied the solutions. So that's 0, and then they count up. Okay, so we have our distances marked on there. And I'm interested in B, so I'm going to draw a line for B. You go from the middle of the spot to measure over. And so that gives me a 4 for the spot. And then the solvent front is all the way up here, so it was a 7. Both of those are in centimeters. Notice that my centimeters will cancel. And so when I get my answer, it will be unitless. Notice that an RF, it doesn't have units because they cancel, and it's always less than 1 because the spot can never travel further than the solvent.